Hi friends, my name is Angela and welcome to my YouTube channel. Every month I do a wrap up of my reading, except I didn't do one in October. So today's reading wrap up is my books I read in October and November. Now I was traveling through a lot of October, so I kind of just read what I had available with me. And then come November, I think I hit a little bit of a reading slump. But overall, in October and November, I read the least amount of books per month. I read 3 in October, 3 books in November, and it was the smallest amount I had read all year. And I'm not sure what it is. I'm not feeling very weary. I'm just struggling to find my next read. That's the problem I have. I pick up a number of books, I'll start reading it, and then I'm finding it hard to keep my attention focused. That said, the books that I did read over October and November were excellent books. It's not that I have not read good books, so I'm looking forward to sharing them with you. Some you might have already heard of because I shared them in my travel vlog in New Zealand and also some of my autumn recommendations. So I'll just give like a little bit of a more in-depth view of them after I've had more time to sit and marinate with them. I also ended up getting a bit of a head cold in mid-November, and when I just wanted to just watch some comfort shows, so I haven't read as much as I normally would have. But anyway, I've got some great books I want to share with you. But before I get into the books that I did read, I'll share with you the books that I am currently reading. And if anything is an indication that I am in a little bit of a slump, it's the fact that I only have 2 books on the go. Normally I have upwards of 5 books at any one time that I'm reading. I can honestly say that I'm not doing that at the moment. First of all, there is Bitter Honey from Carol Lewis. This was a book that I bought in New Zealand and I started reading it on the trip home. And my problem with this book is that I just feel, it's not a problem with the book, it's my problem. I feel I need complete peace and quiet before I read this book because it is so quiet and so, I don't know what the word is, but I just feel like I need to give it my entire attention, and it's difficult when there's noise going on or I've got my mind on other things. So I'm just looking for a pocket of time, perhaps this weekend, when I have peace and quiet and I can finish this book. I'm almost halfway through. I'm really enjoying it. It's about a woman named Hannah whose husband has passed away, and after 50 years of marriage, he's passed away. And it was not a sudden, he had an illness, and so he's had time to really think about his life and the legacy he wants to leave behind. So after he's passed away, he's left a number of letters for Hannah that really examine their marriage and really kind of unravel things for her. I am enjoying my time with it. Some of the Carol Lewis's writing is just so poignant at so many times, and I'm looking forward to finishing it. Her writing is just beautiful. So this is one that's still going. And I'm also reading Blue Sisters, which was a book that I started in New Zealand. I started reading it as we were traveling over there, and then I felt like I wanted something more literary, so I put it down. And I've picked it back up and I'm enjoying it. There are 4 sisters in this book, but there are 3 perspectives because one of the sisters has passed away. And I'm really enjoying my time with each of them and listening to their stories unfold. And what's happening is that they've kind of grown up, they're in their mid-20s to mid-30s, and they're living their lives. They're exceptional in very different ways. And they're having to come together to their childhood home in New York, and the parents are looking to sell it, and they're having to come together to perhaps go through and clean out things and really address their grief and their trauma over their sister passing and their own childhood trauma. And there's a lot in here, but I'm enjoying my time with it. So that leads me into the books that I did read in October. And this one I did share with you in my autumn recommendations part 2, and that is The Crucible by Arthur Miller. So I did read this as I was hopeful it would be a wonderful recommendation for autumn, and I was right. It was wonderful. Arthur Miller is someone that I've been fascinated with for a while because I am a big fan of Marilyn Monroe, and I have read a number of biographies about her, and he is always a key figure as one of her husbands. And she really revered him and she respected him so much because he was this legendary American author, and I really wanted to read some of his work to understand that myself. I'm not sure if it was this year or last year I went and saw Death of a Salesman for the first time. The Crucible is a retelling or a reimagining of the Salem witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts. And Arthur Miller wrote this in the 50s, and what was interesting was that he was going through his own witch hunt of sorts at the same time because of a lot of anti-communist sentiment that was happening in America. There were trials happening. The government was actually on a witch hunt of their own to find anyone who was attributed or affiliated with communist movements. And that led to a number of trials and blacklists where people didn't want to work with anyone that was associated in any way with communist propaganda. Anyway, Arthur Miller was one of those targets. And so this book, or this play, is his own take on that, with how paranoia and fear and suspicion can overtake a community and how our actions can be shaped by that fear. And it was a really fascinating read. Even though it's a play, it reads like a page turner. I highly recommend it. There are elements throughout where he takes a moment away from the stage directions or dialogue to give a bit more information about characters or the time or the place. And I found that very, very beneficial. I really enjoy how sparse Miller's writing is, how effective he is. He doesn't waste a word, but he doesn't use too many words either. And you can really feel the tension in the air. I could almost see the flickering candles in these rooms where they were having these conversations and these trials. And central to the story is a man named John Proctor, who is a flawed man who is trying to redeem himself. But what was interesting was I had seen the movie a number of years ago, and I remember obviously being drawn more towards the girl's story and why they were doing what they were doing, and reading it and really seeing John Proctor's perspective and him as this central character was a different experience for me this time around. So that's always going to be part of why I'm an advocate for rereading, how something resonates with you the first time, and then the next time when you've learnt more and you know more and you have changed as a person, you pick up different things and maybe you resonate with different characters. So I'm really glad that I picked it up. I think I'll probably pick it up again in autumn for me. So that would be in March or April or May next year. And I think it's really opened up an entire new genre for me that I want to continue to read, which is plays. The next book I read in October is Go as a River by Shelley Reid. And this is a really beautiful piece of historical fiction. If you are a historical fiction lover, you will most definitely love this book. And I believe it's a debut novel for Shelley Reid as well. It's quite a lyrical coming-of-age story of a girl, a teenager named Victoria Nash, whose life is really shaped by the loss she's experienced, the family duty she has, and an unexpected love that really changes the path for her forever. I really found Victoria's inner dialogue to be quite poignant and really laced with a lot of wisdom. There were moments that there are things here that you might stitch on a pillow and they become like, your mantra, your quote that you want to live your life by. And I found a lot of moments like that in here. And it was about her self-awareness and how she was able to come to these realizations as she was going through prejudice and loss and tragedy, and she would learn these life lessons and put words to them. And I really, really enjoyed this story. And like so many other great pieces of historical fiction, Shelley Reid took a small piece of true history and has created a novel around it. And I always love that. At the end of it, she gives a little bit of an epilogue explaining how she came to this story and why she wrote it, it being her first book. But I think it was a beautiful read about how people survive heartbreak, how they rebuild themselves, and how they keep moving forward. It was not quite a 5-star read for me. I felt like it was a little slow at times, and I think the ending may have left me wanting a little bit, but it was a beautiful read nonetheless. I'm very pleased to have read it, and I highly recommend it if you are a historical fiction fan. Another book I read on my recent trip in New Zealand was a book called The Whale Rider, and I don't have a copy with me at the moment. As usual, a book tends to meet you at the right place in your life at the right time. And I had this book on my shelf, I want to say at least 10 years, but I think it might have been longer. I think we're talking 15, 20 years I've had it. As usual, I read it at the exact right time when I should have read it. And it meant so much more to me because of that. This is a young adult fantasy book, and it was written in I want to say the 90s. I don't have the info in front of me. I think it might be the 80s actually. For a young adult book, it was some of the most beautiful writing I've come across. The magical realism elements of it was so beautiful. We have a young girl named Kahu who is destined to inherit the leadership of her tribe. However, her grandfather is desperately seeking a male to continue that leadership. He doesn't see that a girl could do it. So we see Kahu coming into her own identity, but her grandfather being very blind to it. He's blinded by what he believes should be happening because he believes that only males can lead the tribe. But Kahu is the one that has so much care and understanding for their history and their ancestors and their connection to the whales, which is a large part of this. It's a really powerful, uplifting story. At the end of the book, there is a prologue where Whitty, the author, talks about how he had a conversation with his daughters and they were saying, why is it never a girl that is the one to save the tribe, to save the people, the family? It's always a boy. And so he wrote this story out of that conversation with them. And I loved it. It was so uplifting and powerful and beautifully written. And I look forward to spending time with it again in the future. I do not believe that I have read Animal Farm before. Not at school. I don't think I've read it. I knew a little bit of the premise of it. I know it is a banned book in many countries. And I know that there is a lot, it's a bit of a satire and an allegorical tale. I can see why it is easily one of the best short novels in the English language, and why it has stood the test of time since it was first published in the mid-20th century. So at its very basic level, it is a story of animals on a farm who overthrow the humans that are in charge of everything and decide that they can do a better job of it on their own. They don't need the humans to do it. And of course, things go a little awry, and it's this huge exploration around how Orwell uses these animals to explore political agenda and totalitarian rule. And there's so many elements to it. And I guess I'm not going to add anything new to the conversation here, but I would recommend that if you haven't read it before, do read it. If you read it a long time ago, read it again. I think it's a really easy read and it just makes you think about little things. It's not a big, whack over the head, but I really enjoyed my time with it. It's one of those things that gives you a bit of clarity. So I'm really glad I read it. Probably not one of my favorite books of the year, but I'm glad to have read it. And I think, again, that might be a similar theme with books that I'm looking for, is books that have caused discourse because they do push the envelope, they do call out human behaviour that is not okay. And I think I might look at reading some other ones like that, like 1984 or Fahrenheit 451. And I definitely do want to read a little more Orwell, because I do actually want to read a biography about Orwell soon, which is all about his rose gardens. There's just a weird parallel there. And if there is a story about a writer and their garden, I'm all in for it. A book I just finished last week is called A Poisoner's Tale by Cathryn Kemp. And this was a book that I saw randomly on a shelf in a bookstore. It caught my attention. Sometimes you just want a really good historical fiction book. That's all you're after. And this was the one for me. It is set in the mid-1600s in Italy, and it is actually based on the true story of a woman named Giulia Tofana, who is said to be the first documented serial killer in history. And the narrative starts with Giulia and 4 other women who have the noose around their necks and they are about to die. So this is how it opens in the prologue. Rome, 5th of July, 1959. It ends with the scaffold, 5 women, blindfolded, shorn, dressed in sacking, trembling before the gallows. All of us wearing our own noose, now slack, now heavy around our necks. The foul sorceress, Giovanna, the treacherous witch, Graziosa, the most wicked temptress, Maria, the devil's whore, Girolama, and then me, the poisoner of Palermo, the woman who started it all. So that's how it starts. We know that they are going to end this story on the gallows. And then the next part of the book, Giulia is 13 years of age. She is in Sicily with her mother and her mother's husband, who is Giulia's stepfather. And at this point is where Giulia is let into this secret world that her mother inhabits, where she helps women, she heals them, but she also gives them this poison that is undetectable to allow them to escape abusive marriages or whatever the situation may be, and their husbands are the ones that receive this poison and die without there's no evidence that it was poison. It looks very natural. And she's passing this on to Giulia, saying that Giulia will be the next person to pick up this cross to bear, so to speak. In this book, there is a time jump of about 23 years and a location change where Giulia is in Rome in Italy. And we follow Giulia and this band of women that she has surrounded herself with as they help the women in Rome. And the situation they find themselves in is that there is a plague in Rome at the time, in this time in the 1600s. And so when they are using the poison to poison their husbands, it is kind of being hidden underneath the fact that a lot of other people are dying anyway because of the plague. But the Catholic Church feels that there is something wrong underfoot. They believe that there is witchcraft involved, and so they set out on a hunt for the person who is poisoning these husbands, because it's only men who are dying this way. I really did enjoy it as a feminist read and a story about the value of sisterhood. There's a lot of themes in here. There is a lot of trigger warnings. I would recommend that you look it up if you're looking to read it. I personally felt that it was integral to the story, these things that happened. But we're talking about 17th century Europe, when women were not at the top of the food chain and horrible things happened to women. And the author doesn't shy away from that. And I don't think she glorifies it or glamorizes it. But just if you are sensitive to those triggers, just maybe have a look into it first. But I do think it is a dark, sometimes disturbing read. Excellent historical fiction, and it will transport you away from your reading chair. And if you love those historical fiction books that do that, this is one that will. So the last book that I have read in November is The Mushroom Tapes, which I have gabbed on about for such a long time. I was in a bookstore, I saw it, I picked it up, I did not buy it, so I ended up listening to it on audio, which I think was the better option, which I'll share with you why in a moment. So The Mushroom Tapes is quite literally a conversation, which it does say on the cover. It says a conversation about this trial, and that's the trial of Erin Patterson, who is being tried for the murder of 3 people and the attempted murder of another person after she fed them food that was laced with death cap mushrooms. And this just happened this year in Australia. The trial happened this year. The event happened in 2023, I think. And this is an audiobook that is narrated by all 3 authors, and then it has a 4th voice, which is like a cohesive narrative around it. So it brings together 3 quite renowned true crime writers in Australia, and that is Helen Garner, Chloe Hooper, and I'm not sure I'm going to get the surname right, Sarah Krasnostein. And this book is essentially transcripts of their conversations around the trial as they are driving from Melbourne to Orwell, as they are in hotel rooms after the trial has happened during the day, and they're dissecting it and talking it through, the media scrums, and various discussions that start with the trial and end up as these really interesting conversations about love, hatred, marriage, revenge, money, jealousy, so many layers. And the book it really just jumps right into the deep end, and as these women don't seem to filter their thoughts, they just seem to have these running thoughts happening. And while I don't think there's anything new essentially in this book, the insight into the minds of these 3 authors is quite fascinating. And each author brings something different. Sarah is quite forensic and journalistic in her approach. Helen Garner is just a very curious, thinking out loud kind of person. And then Chloe is kind of in the middle ground, where she is a much gentler narrative. But it reads like a play. It actually has sections of the book where it has their name and it has what they said directly after it. And so it reads a lot like a play. And there are some fascinating conversations about the folklore around women killing. And there's even a bit in there where they started talking about Julia Tofana from Rome in the 1600s, who was known to be the first female serial killer. There was even a moment where they talked about her, which I found I think I might have screamed. They also really try to understand who Erin is. They record their observations, their thoughts, their impressions, and a possible motive for the crime. And I think if there is anything to take away from this book, is that I think they hit the nail on the head. I think they find the motive as to why Erin Patterson did this. And so I would recommend reading it alone, just to have that moment where you think your jaw drops to the floor and you're like, that might have been it. I think that was it. Because there was in the trial, they didn't have to show what the motive was, just whether the intent was there. Anyway, that was a fascinating moment. That alone was well worth reading the book. I do think perhaps it would have been better as a podcast. I'm not sure, but I definitely am glad that I picked it up as an audiobook over reading it. I think because you get the cadence of how that particular author is talking and their thoughts and the emphasis, and I feel like that was interesting. Helen Garner is brilliant. Just listening to her little pearls of wisdom, her little nuggets, her curiosity was fascinating to be inside her mind. And that's it. That is everything I read in October and November. And as you can see, it was quite a slow couple of months. But I can't believe that in a few short weeks, I'll be sharing with you what my favourite books of 2025 are. That is so close. We're just a few weeks away from the end of the year. And so I've got my thinking cap on, really thinking hard about what books have made it for me this year. It is not as easy as last year. Last year I had standout winners. This year, I feel it has been a little bit of a mid-year. There's a couple of standouts, but could I say there are 10 standouts? I don't know. I don't know if I could. Anyway, my favorite book from October and November, I think my favorite one in October was probably The Whale Rider, although I really did enjoy The Crucible. And then my favorite book for November is probably, I don't know, there's no big standouts, maybe A Poisoner's Tale. It felt like a real great transportive read. I'm glad I picked that one up. That was just a really good one. Please let me know what your favourite book from November was below. I would love to hear from you. You always have such great recommendations. I know I read widely, but I think you guys read really widely, and there's always some great recommendations, not just for me. Other people find the comments and they're like, I'm really glad I saw that. I'm going to go find that book. So thank you so much for leaving your comments about that stuff. I'd love to hear what your favourite was from November. And I will see you in December with my next video. Have a wonderful week of reading ahead, and I'll speak with you soon. Bye.